Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9 FM. I'm Paul Kretschmer. Today is a visit with Marc Fitch from the Yankee Institute for Public Policy and his latest analysis on how things are going in Connecticut state government.
Well, it's kind of hard to tell because Governor Lamont's new transportation plan hasn't been released publicly yet. He shared it with Senate Republicans, and they are looking at it. Reportedly, according to news sources, it's going to leverage federal borrowing at a very low interest rate, combined with some tolls. I think upwards of 14 tolls on different bridges around the state to provide a kind of revenue backing for those for the federal loans. So that's what we have so far. That's what we've been told so far. But nobody's actually seen the plan outside of the legislative leaders. So it's set to be released later this week. I guess we'll find out. And I know that, Senator, the Republican leader, Len Fasano, has been fairly vocal about Governor Lamont's bonding package, that he hasn't been able to see the details of it, and it has yet to be brought to the public's attention as well. So, right now it's just it's kind of like a lot of things are going on behind the curtain, but we don't get to see it yet.
Does it almost get to be a joking or a comedy point at some point when reporters ask the governor whenever they see him? I've seen several pieces on the Connecticut network lately where a reporter asks once again, and even may allude to the fact that it's once again, and then the governor kind of picks up a set piece of an answer, which is, well, we're still working on it. Maybe we'll get it out there next week, that sort of thing. Does it become difficult for the average citizen to take this whole process seriously when it almost becomes a comic routine rather than a serious engagement between two people? Yeah,
it looks like stalling and hesitating because due to lack of confidence and trying to get everybody on board when frankly the Democrats are in charge. They don't need everybody on board. And it's also Connecticut. You're never going to get everybody on board. So it kind of looks like stalling and like a lack of confidence or a lot of times it looks like they're not quite sure what they're doing yet.
I noticed during the legislative season, both this year and last year, 2018 and now 2019 as well, that there were some members of the General Assembly, like the Speaker of the House, who were pretty out in front saying, we're going to work on this. We're going to vote on it. We're going to bring it out on the floor. I've noticed lately when checking the various sources for audio material for newscasts and programs like this one that neither the leadership in the House nor the leadership in the Senate are saying much of anything on social media or otherwise, audibly at least, that they want to be pinned on the record for.
Well, yeah, because 2 years in a row they tried for a big tolls bill, and 2 years in a row they got shot down. They've probably learned their lesson at this point to not, count their chickens before they're hatched and come out saying that we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because it's blown up in their face a couple times. And even with Ned Lamont's, big push in 2019, it all just got washed away, and they're facing a lot of pressure. No Tolls Connecticut is still out there, still, reaching out to people, still, I think they're sending mailers and they're doing billboards and things like that. They're still out there working. They never stopped. And by the same right, Lamont's team hasn't stopped working on this either. So, and also, we have the elections tomorrow, the municipal elections, and next year we have the legislative elections. You're not going to see a lot of enthusiasm from lawmakers to pass something that has the potential to be highly unpopular in an election year. They're probably hoping to go into the session, maybe do a couple quick fix bills, something that, kind of has a little bit of, general public support. Nobody really wants to go on the record doing something that is potentially very unpopular. That could ignite, one party against another when it comes to the elections in 2020.
I've noticed on the CTN schedule a lot of task forces and hearings about a variety of different issues, and one of the things that's voiced by either chairs or co-chairs or even line members of those committees, whether they're General Assembly members or members of the public who are included under the mandate that the General Assembly gives those task forces, that they're hopeful that various initiatives that we're looking at right now, this is during 2019, will be ready to present to the General Assembly as a whole when the calendar turns and the 2020 session comes up. Do you think that there are some worthwhile initiatives, and I'm not asking you to get specific necessarily, but do you feel that there may be some that you're aware of that might actually go on the calendar because they are feel-good or popular motions that will allow the General Assembly to appear to be working hard while avoiding some of the stuff like tolls, for instance, that has some real fallout potential to damage a lot of lives politically come a year from now?
Well, here's the thing with a lot of these commissions and committees to study this or study that. They study it, they do something, they maybe put up a bill and it goes nowhere. And it's kind of been the tradition in Connecticut. It's like if you don't actually want to pass something, or you know something's not going to work, but you still want to kind of make people on your side happy, you do a commission to study it. So you see that come up a lot. I think, they tried to do a real-time sales tax collection thing as part of the budget this past year, which is actually almost impossible to do. And when they realized it was impossible to do, they decided to create a commission to study it. And that's what happens in Connecticut. You have, commissions, to study something. They kind of get together and they talk about it, and then maybe not much happens. There's, one thing we are kind of hopeful for. There is a commission to study, possible reforms to the prisoner reentry system in Connecticut. It's kind of a big commission. It's got some subcommittees to it. We're very happy that one of our Yankee Institute members is serving on it, and hopefully they can get something done. But that it's kind of been the story. I mean, remember when we had the big CEO commission with Robert Smith and Bob Patricelli and all these different business leaders? Yeah, and there was a lot of fanfare and there was a lot of anticipation, and they came out with their findings, and it went nowhere because their findings were middle of the road. They didn't fall down on any particular political aisle, and everybody didn't like it. So they couldn't make one side or the other happy, and it ended up just they had a hearing on it.
Yeah, I remember
and that was about the last you heard of it.
Yeah,
so,
I'm afraid some of what you've been saying for the last minute or two resonates with me because one of the things I do in my pastime is I'm a railroad buff. And so I like to look at stuff about the Shoreline East or Metro North or now the Hartford line lately. But
I'm going to have to call you for information from now on.
Yeah. one of the things that the Connecticut Department of Transportation has a reputation for, especially among people who post to forums who live outside Connecticut but watch what goes on inside Connecticut very, very closely because of their interest. One of the reputations Connecticut has is they don't pass laws; they just do surveys.
Yeah,
and most of the time, those kind of comments, Mark, come across from people from outside Connecticut in a very, very sarcastic tone.
Well, I mean, I might have had a little sarcastic edge on my response, but yeah, and so we do see that, and it's tough to get some big things done. It's tough to get big unpopular things done, and sometimes you do need to study something, but in general, a lot of those studies and a lot of those commissions and committees, they form, but they die out, or they come up with their findings, and you see little to no action because you can't make the legislative leaders take action on it.
Right.
One thing we had a commission to study pretty much like selling state property to help fund the teacher pension fund.
Right.
Probably a good idea. I mean, you can't hurt, but nothing really happened with that. I mean, they used what they did in the budget is they just extended the payments. So it's not like you put a whole lot of new money in there. I mean, they took some lotto money and put it in there so that they could extend the payments and keep the bondholders happy. But other than that, like the conversation just kind of died after that. And you have other instances where committees even fail to meet, or they sign legislation to form a committee or commission, and it never even happens. I know there was a transportation commission that just never existed. It was signed into law, just never happened.
So much of what goes on in the public dialogue in Connecticut, whether it's the governor's administration or the departments specifically or the commissioners or even the General Assembly, so much of what goes on in Connecticut, and this is something I've observed in the years I've lived in the state, which is almost 40 years now, there's so much that's reactive rather than we'll do this because we'll get ahead of the curve here and we'll do something, whatever it may be, because it's the right thing to do before something else happens that makes everything so sour. Instead, we wait for the bridge to fall, the Mianus River Bridge to fall, as it did over 30 years ago, before we fix things.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, and there's also, I mean, but here's the thing: is like a lot of people think that if you just show the lawmakers the information, if you just show them the numbers, that they'll react and do something, and that is not the case. When you start talking about pension problems, or you start talking about how much we're going to have to pay in bonded debt, and when you start telling them that hey, people are actually moving out of the state, which that came out last week. We lost 30,000 people last year,
right?
Net. You can tell lawmakers this, but it's not going to make a bit of difference because the numbers don't change the political calculus at the Capitol, and that's where the big difference is. You could sit there and say this meteor is heading straight for Connecticut, but that doesn't mean, and that could absolutely be true. The meteor is heading towards Connecticut, but that doesn't mean that they will actually react to it at the Capitol because they have political considerations rather than just the financial and the numbers. That's where the trouble lies, and that's why the idea that running the government's like a business is false, because you don't have to deal with that in the business world.
Which raises for me what you just said, a very good point to touch on, which is how wide is the gap, credibility or otherwise, between what ought to be done and the political reality you just sketched out? What does it take to get such an entrenched institution called government and politics shaken so firmly off its foundation that things actually get done after the point at which we say everyone gripes but nothing ever happens?
It would. I think if the country and the state were to hit another recession, you might see some serious reaction. But right now, Connecticut's almost suffering from a small modicum of success in that things are kind of going okay. The economy's lagging the rest of the nation, but not bad. Not bad compared to the rest of the years in Connecticut. And tax revenue collection is up. We have a surplus. We have a rainy day fund. So when lawmakers kind of look at this stuff, and they always think in the short term, but when they look at it and they say, hey, things aren't so bad right now, we don't really have to fix anything. We have this big savings account, and we're ready if something goes wrong. I put out a story a couple weeks ago showing that from 2022 to 2024, we're going to be facing $1 billion+ deficits again.
I read that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't even matter that we raised taxes a whole bunch this past session, this past budget. That doesn't matter anymore. We're still going to have those huge budget deficits that they're going to be facing in 3 consecutive years. So, everything. I think there's a bit of a sense of complacency at the Capitol right now, and I don't know what it would take to shake that. I mean, they keep having their transportation funding debate and all that kind of stuff, and they act like it's an emergency. It's really not. The special transportation fund set to grow to over $2 billion. It's not an immediate emergency.
As always, your contact point, and see that listeners contact you and see what they can find out further that will matter before the next assembly session hits the fan.
Yeah, come to yankeeinstitute.org, and you can always email me at Marc, that's Marc with a C, at yankeeinstitute.org.
Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure speaking with you once again. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
For further information, call us at 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff or management of this station. I'm Paul Kretschmer on the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from WIHS, Middletown.